Pamplona Cathedral. It was funny yesterday when we walked back into the town, the city, after walking through nature for a while. Yeah, I feel like a bit of an alien, but like you've just come in from another planet. But this morning, sure enough, very quickly feels normal again. I'm saying goodbye to Pamplona, and you can see a factory in the background, and got me thinking, like, why do factories have to be so ugly? Maybe it's that, like, industrial engineers or civil engineers, you know, don't really have too much of a concept of beauty, but I think we all have a concept of beauty. We all recognise a beautiful person, etc. So why are they so ugly? Is it because when you go there to work, you feel like you're in a prison and can't escape, and as a result you're more dedicated to the task? Doesn't seem to make sense to me. Is it for purely practical reasons? Well, one thing I remember Ron Dennis said on his leaving do, he actually paid for the whole company to go to Cirque du Soleil when he was leaving McLaren, which had been his baby for like 30 years, maybe more. And he said, one of the things he said was form following function, but that is a thing of beauty. Like, when you create something that works really well, by definition it's going to be beautiful. Speaking of ugly architecture and factories, I think a lot of apartment blocks, modern apartment blocks, I mean, these aren't bad in the, you know, in the range of apartment blocks. They're still pretty soul destroying. You walk through some of the older areas, these beautifully hand-built stone cottages and houses, and you know, these are like hundreds of years old. Just seems a much more uplifting place to live in. That said, typically the ones that are surviving are probably, you know, the mansions of the day, and the average person at the time wouldn't have been living in such a nice house, and probably their houses aren't surviving, so kind of fair enough maybe. On the flip side, sunflowers. You might do the Camino one day, be walking down a main road in Spain, and be thinking to yourself, what the hell am I doing here? And what in my life brought me to this moment? And the really cool thing about it is, when you're doing the walk, as crazy as it seems, I don't know, I feel really happy. I feel very, like, carefree, and you just don't really have worries. It's super random, but really cool. So maybe that was a focus on my career, a focus on getting toys, you know, mountain bikes or motorbikes, cars, vintage cars, really cool. Glad I don't have one though. Yeah, and I did some little volunteering bits and pieces here and there, and felt freaking amazing. Like, I'd be driving away thinking, wow, like, that was amazing. I've just been helping people for a whole afternoon. I feel better than I have in months. So it's a real wake-up call for me. This is probably a nice segue into the topic of ego. And working at McLaren, being involved with fast cars, I've certainly, and myself, I've certainly come across my fair share of egos, including my own. And that's a battle, because ultimately I think, the Buddhist kind of point of view of the ego is quite self-defeating, and it makes us less of a nice person to be around, and in fact gets in the way of us achieving things, makes us more defensive, and has a whole range of problems. On the flip side, maybe at a certain stage of your life, it can give you some motivation and a bit of a kick to go, I'm better than everyone else, I'm gonna go and do this and prove them wrong. And maybe that helps us at some point, but then eventually becomes self-defeating. And the cool thing is that maybe not self-defeating in the sense of success or worldly success, but self-defeating in the sense of a feeling of well-being and happiness. I think the ego can be a bit extreme, if it can create extremes, or as Buddhism would have it, yin and yang type stuff, whereby you sort of maybe that extreme self-belief. Look at a guy like Michael Jordan in that recent documentary. That brought some tremendous achievements. But along with that there comes this dark side, it's like you never quite get just purely the good. You kind of get, the more good you get, the more, there's some sort of offset going on, and there's a bit of a dark side emerging. You look at Michael Jackson, he's probably a more extreme example, just a total cultural icon, and his life basically came to ruin, even although he had it all. Elvis, another example. So, I don't know any of these people, but I think it's probably fair to say that ego did play a role in that, creating that huge divide and the eventual downfall, and the eventual unhappiness. I guess Christian teachings would point us towards love, that love is the answer. Love the Lord your God, have no other gods before him, and love your neighbour as yourself. Both of those, not necessarily easy things to do, but by putting others and God in front of you, it seems like a practical way of defeating the ego. And that probably comes then back around full circle to service and selfishness, or service versus selfishness. We start out as babies, self-focused, maybe not selfish, but let's say self-focused in a good way, in a necessary way. Then we grow up, some faster than others, me not the fastest, and eventually have kids of our own, for some of us, and in that scenario we're totally other focused, and yet I think in many cases deeply satisfied, because we're no longer worried about ourselves, we're worried about our children. But that doesn't necessarily just have to be in the family context. Maybe you're providing a service or caring for others in a business context as a manager or the owner of a business. Or maybe, you know, you're a priest and you're trying to take care of the people in your parish, the people you come across from a pastoral sense standpoint. Maybe you're a Buddhist monk and you're meditating and thinking of other people and hoping they're good. So it's there's many ways to achieve it. I'm hoping that these little videos can be of some service to somebody else someday. Maybe they're considering doing the Camino, you know, maybe for my brother's kids, maybe for my own kids someday. They can look back at these and go, that's cool. Kind of understand him a bit better and helps me a little bit on my journey. Love is another topic we spoke about yesterday. One of the guys on the Camino is going through a really hard time. His girlfriend, the mother of his girlfriend has cancer, breast cancer, and so his girlfriend, as a result, I think he's going through a bit of depression, and it's a quite traumatic event, and that's had a big impact on their relationship, and that causes enormous suffering for this guy. It sort of really reinforced the point that you know, to love fully, you have to be willing to suffer in the most painful way possible, and you will suffer in the most painful way possible, but all of us yearn to be loved and to love. And I guess that's sort of the focal element of the Christian message is Jesus dying on the cross, and the cross being, you know, the symbol of Christianity. And so Jesus was willing to suffer in the most painful way possible for all of us. Commitment was another topic we chatted about, and I suppose the idea that you know, a lot of guys, me included, suffer from commitment phobia, and that's kind of, in a way, you know, let's say like a fear of the suffering that loving fully can bring on. We've all had our tough experiences, you know, of that nature. So we all probably have a few battle scars, and makes it a little bit harder to take that jump, take that sort of risk. But it's a necessary one. Find it interesting how aerodynamics works in nature. This little spot here, there's a cutting. I think it probably creates some vortexes which push more air through this tunnel, like it creates a kind of a Venturi effect, which is quite a nice effect when you are drying off a bit of sweat from a climb. A nice little breeze. For experimentation's sake, little bit further down the road, less breeze. So that's me walked another day. I'm in Puente La Reina, Bridge of the Queen, and I walked about 30 kilometers today. That was the longest I've walked on this Camino and in my life. Yeah, I kind of took the long detour around. I thought it'd be more interesting. It turned out it was probably the wrong way. It was like the bike trail as opposed to the hiking trail. And then I took another detour with a French man that I met to see a beautiful church, Ulrika, I think it was called. And it was cool. I had a long chat with him. He was in human resources during his career. He has a son working in Abu Dhabi and a son working in Holland. And he was a director of human resources at Danone and a few other French companies. A French guy, lovely fella. Taught me quite a lot about history, which is cool. A lot of interesting facts that he knew. And he also was a bit of an expert in Gothic churches, but Romanesque churches, more to the point, which was before the Gothic period. And he pointed me towards some really cool reading material for some of that stuff. Anyway, another day, and it was enjoyable. It was tough. It had its high moments and its low moments, and it's good to be here, and it's good to take off the backpack, all 8.3 kilos of it without water, probably about 10 with, and I can't wait to take off the shoes. That's it for another day.